Henderson, how you doing? This week, on 4th of July, we celebrate the American Independence Day. How much do you know about it? Do you know what facts led to the celebration of this date nowadays? Well, hold on to your chair and get ready for this brief history lesson.
At first, most colonists were happy to be part of the British Empire. But in 1765, the British Parliament passed laws such as the Stamp Act, which for the first time taxed a wide range of transactions in the colonies. The Americans had not only to buy goods from the British, but pay tax on them as well. There were many riots and the tax never got collected. The British decided to rescind this law convinced by Benjamin Franklin. In 1767, the Parliament again tries to tax all goods imported from Great Britain. The Americans organized a boycott of British goods subject to taxation. In an effort to take over the situation, Great Britain sent troops to occupy Boston, which only made the situation even worse. This episode became known as the Townshend Acts. In March 1770, the British troops were still in Boston and things were tense. A small disagreement between a British soldier and apprentice wigmaker ended up with a crowd of 200 colonists surrounding 7 British soldiers. The soldiers lost their cool and started firing at the colonists, killing 3 and leaving other 2 mortally wounded. This episode became famous as the Boston Massacre. In 1773, the British decided to withdraw their soldiers and cancelled a great deal of the Townshend Acts. But they left a tax on an important good, the tea. The Tea Act had the objective to financially help the British East India Company, giving advantages so that it could sell tea with a price that undercut the American merchants who imported from Dutch traders. A group of rebels invades 3 ships in Boston and destroys 92,000 pounds of tea. Curiosity, they were disguised as Mohawks. Many members of the Parliament were shareholders of the British East India Company, so let's say they really took things personally. This episode became famous as the Boston Tea Party. After that, we have the Coercive Acts, 1774. Basically, the British closed the harbor until restitution of the tea destroyed, replaced the colony's elected council with one appointed by the British, and gave sweeping powers to the British military governor General Thomas Gage, and forbade town meetings without approval. American colonists also got very pissed at the Quartering Act, which said that the colonies had to pay for the cost of housing British troops in America. Also, in 1774, the colonies' representatives, including George Washington of Virginia, John and Samuel Adams of Massachusetts, Patrick Henry of Virginia, and John Jay of New York, met in Philadelphia in September 1774 to give voice to their grievances against the British Crown. It was the First Continental Congress. They still hadn't demanded independence, however, they issued a declaration of the rights due every citizen, including life, liberty, property, assembly, and trial by jury. The Continental Congress voted to meet again in May 1775 to consider further action, but by that time, violence had already broken out. In 1775, the British wanted to arrest the colonial radical leaders Sam Adams and John Hancock in Lexington, and also seize the gunpowder in Concord. However, American spies discovered it and the British troops were attacked along the way and suffered heavy casualties, having to retreat to Boston. From this point on, we had the Revolutionary War, 1775 to 1783, also known as the American Revolution. By June 1776, with the Revolutionary War in full swing, a growing majority of the colonies had come to favor independence from Britain. On July 4th, the Continental Congress voted to adopt the Declaration of Independence.
Do you know what facts led to the celebration